Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear seems impossible. You'll think I'm exaggerating. But I promise you, by the time we reach the end, you'll realize that sometimes reality is stranger and more beautiful than anything we could make up. So hit that subscribe button now, because what happens in the middle of this story will change the way you see every stranger you pass on the street. The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital's emergency room cast harsh shadows across Dr. Amanda Richardson's face as she looked at the schedule board. 2:47 a.m., 16 hours into her shift. At 28, fresh out of residency and drowning in student loan debt that would take decades to repay, she'd learned to survive on coffee, adrenaline, and the stubborn belief that medicine was still about helping people, not just processing insurance claims. That's when security brought him in. The man was maybe 50, though the streets had aged him in ways that made it hard to tell. His clothes were layered and filthy, his beard matted, and his right hand was wrapped in what looked like newspaper that had soaked through with blood. The smell hit Amanda before he reached her station. Unwashed body, infection, desperation. "Found him passed out behind the dumpsters," the security guard said, his tone suggesting this was a routine inconvenience. "Probably drunk. Want me to just put him in the hallway?" But something in the man's eyes stopped Amanda cold. Despite the obvious pain, despite the fever flush on his cheeks, despite the trembling that racked his body, those eyes were alert, aware, and filled with something Amanda recognized because she'd felt it herself when looking at her own student loan statements, the crushing weight of knowing you need help but can't afford to ask for it. "I'll take him," Amanda said, grabbing a wheelchair. The man tried to stand on his own, pride fighting with pain. "I don't have insurance," he said, his voice rough but educated, the kind of voice that had once given presentations or taught classes. "I can't pay." "Did I ask about your insurance?" Amanda replied, helping him into the wheelchair. "Let me see that hand." As she unwrapped the makeshift bandage in exam room 3, Amanda's stomach tightened. The wound was deep, already showing signs of infection, probably 3 or 4 days old. The man had obviously tried to treat it himself with whatever he could find, but without proper medical care, he was looking at serious complications, possibly sepsis. "What's your name?" Amanda asked, starting an IV line. "James," he said quietly. "James Crawford." "Well, James Crawford, you've got a nasty infection." "When did this happen?" 4 days ago, broken glass in a dumpster." He paused. "I know I should have come in sooner, but the ER charges a facility fee just for walking through the door," Amanda finished, "even before anyone treats you." James looked at her with surprise. "You understand?" Amanda understood better than he knew. "James, I'm going to be straight with you. You need antibiotics, probably a week's course. This wound needs proper cleaning and stitches. Without treatment, this infection could spread to your bloodstream. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "That I'm screwed," James said with a bitter laugh. "Because even if you treat me tonight, I'll get a bill for thousands of dollars that I can't pay, which will ruin whatever tiny chance I might have of getting back on my feet someday." Amanda looked at the clock, then at the nurse's station visible through the exam room window. She was about to do something that could cost her her job, maybe even her medical license. But she'd gone into medicine to help people, and the bureaucracy that put profits before patients had been slowly killing that idealism for years. "James, I need you to listen carefully," she said. "I'm going to treat you tonight. I'm going to give you antibiotics, clean and stitch that wound, and make sure you're stable. And then I'm going to lose your paperwork." James stared at her. "You can't do that. They'll fire you." "Let me worry about that," Amanda said, already pulling supplies from the cabinet. "But we need to work fast, and you need to leave before the morning shift comes in." Over the next 2 hours, Amanda worked with the focused intensity she'd learned during residency. She cleaned the wound thoroughly, administered broad-spectrum antibiotics through the IV, and carefully stitched the laceration while James gritted his teeth against the pain. She gave him a week's supply of oral antibiotics from the sample closet, along with detailed instructions for wound care. "You were a professional," James said as she finished. It wasn't a question. "I taught engineering at State University for 12 years, he replied. Then my wife got cancer. The bills bankrupted us even with insurance. She died anyway. I lost the house, lost my job during treatment, couldn't find another one at my age. That was 3 years ago. Amanda felt tears pricking her eyes. This man could have been her father, could have been anyone's father. But what James said next would stay with Amanda for years. You know what the hardest part is? James continued. It's not the hunger or the cold or even the danger. It's the invisibility. People look right through you once you're on the streets, like you're not even human anymore. But you... He paused, his voice breaking. You saw me. You treated me like I mattered. You do matter, Amanda said firmly. Every person who walks through those doors matters. As James prepared to leave, Amanda scribbled something on a prescription pad and handed it to him. There's a free clinic on Maple Street. Dr. Sarah Kim runs it. Show her this note. She'll check on your hand in a few days. James took the note with hands that shook, and for a moment Amanda thought he might cry. Instead, he straightened his shoulders with whatever dignity he had left. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. I won't forget this. Just take care of that hand, Amanda replied. And James? It won't always be like this. Things can change. 5 years later, Amanda was running late for the hospital board meeting. Her career had taken an unexpected turn after that night with James. The missing paperwork had been discovered, and while she'd been reprimanded, the incident had caught the attention of Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran the free clinic. Sarah had offered Amanda a part-time position there, and Amanda had discovered a passion for serving underserved populations that her traditional ER work had never satisfied. Now, she was being considered for a newly created position, Director of Community Health Initiatives. The hospital, facing public pressure about medical debt and health disparities, wanted to create programs that actually helped people instead of just generating good PR. The board meeting today would determine whether the position would be funded and whether Amanda would get the job. She rushed into the conference room 15 minutes late, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, I was at the clinic and we had an emergency. Dr. Richardson, please have a seat, the board chairman said. His tone was formal, impossible to read. We've been discussing the community health proposal. Amanda sat down, trying to read the faces around the table. Then she noticed someone sitting in the corner of the room, someone she hadn't seen when she first entered. A man in an expensive suit, well-groomed, confident, taking notes on a tablet. Her breath caught when she saw his face. It took her a moment to place him because the context was so wrong. The last time she'd seen that face, it had been gaunt, bearded, desperate. But those eyes were the same, alert, aware, and now filled with something that looked like barely contained emotion. James Crawford. He stood up as Amanda stared at him in shock. Dr. Richardson, the board chairman continued, I'd like to introduce you to James Crawford, the lead donor behind the community health initiative you're here to discuss. Mr. Crawford has pledged $10 million to establish the program, with one condition. Amanda couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. James stepped forward, professional and composed in a way that reminded Amanda of what he'd said about being a professor. He extended his hand. Dr. Richardson, he said, his voice steady but his eyes shining. It's good to see you again. The room seemed to tilt. I don't understand, Amanda whispered. Perhaps we should let Mr. Crawford explain, the chairman said. James pulled out a chair for Amanda, then sat down beside her. The other board members were watching with obvious curiosity, clearly not understanding the history between them. 5 years ago, James began, addressing the room, I was homeless, living on the streets, suffering from an infection that was about to kill me. I went to County General's ER, knowing I couldn't pay, knowing I'd just be adding to a debt I could never escape. He turned to Amanda. Dr. Richardson treated me anyway. She risked her career to make sure I got the care I needed, and she did it not because she expected anything in return, but because she believed I deserved to be treated like a human being. The board members shifted in their seats, suddenly very interested. What Dr. Richardson didn't know, James continued, was that I'd been working on rebuilding my life. I'd been teaching freelance engineering courses online when I could access library computers. I'd been developing a small software program in my spare time. He smiled slightly. That program was acquired by a major tech company 18 months ago. The sale gave me enough capital to start investing, and I got lucky. Very lucky. In the past 5 years, I've built a portfolio worth approximately $43 million. Amanda felt tears streaming down her face. But money doesn't buy dignity, James said quietly. It doesn't buy the feeling of being seen, of being valued. Dr. Richardson gave me that on the worst night of my life. She reminded me that I was still a person worth saving. He turned back to the board. So when I learned that County General was considering a community health initiative, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I want to fund a program that treats people the way Dr. Richardson treated me, with dignity, compassion, and without regard for their ability to pay. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Crawford has pledged $10 million to establish the Richardson Community Health Initiative, he said. The program will provide free or sliding-scale care to underserved populations, with a focus on treating people with dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. Amanda couldn't speak, couldn't process the magnitude of what was happening. There's one condition, James added. Dr. Richardson has to run it. She has to be the director, with full autonomy over how the program operates and who it serves. The chairman looked at Amanda. Dr. Richardson, the board has reviewed your proposal and Mr. Crawford's funding offer. We're prepared to offer you the position of Director of the Richardson Community Health Initiative with a starting annual budget of $2 million and a salary commensurate with the role. Amanda finally found her voice. James, she said, this is too much. I didn't help you expecting anything like this. I know, James replied. That's exactly why you're the right person to run this program. You helped me because you believed it was the right thing to do, not because you thought you'd benefit from it. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to her. Inside, you'll find the full details of the endowment, the proposed budget, and hiring guidelines. But there's one other thing. James pulled out a small envelope. This is a check for $200,000. It's not part of the program funding. It's a personal gift to you. Amanda's hands shook as she took the envelope. Your student loans, James said simply. I looked into it. You're still paying them off, and they're preventing you from taking the kinds of risks that would let you make the biggest difference. Consider them paid. The room was silent. Several board members were visibly moved. I can't accept this, Amanda whispered. Yes, you can, James said firmly, because 5 years ago, you gave me something much more valuable than money. You gave me back my humanity. You reminded me that I was worth saving, worth caring about. That gift, Dr. Richardson, is priceless. This is just me trying to pay forward what you gave me. 1 year later, the Richardson Community Health Initiative had treated over 5,000 patients. Amanda stood in the newly opened clinic, watching as her staff, a team of 12 doctors, nurses, and social workers, moved through their shifts with the same philosophy she'd employed that night with James. No one was turned away. No one was treated as less valuable because they couldn't pay. Everyone was seen, heard, and cared for with dignity. The program had become a model for other hospitals across the country. James's initial $10 million investment had attracted matching funds from other donors, and the initiative was expanding to 3 additional cities. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't what made Amanda proud. It was the stories. The single mother who finally got treatment for her diabetes, the veteran who got the mental health care the VA couldn't provide, the college student who received care for a chronic condition without going into debt. James visited the clinic regularly, often sitting in the waiting room and talking to patients. He'd tell them his story, not to impress them, but to give them hope that circumstances could change, that rock bottom wasn't the end of the story. Today was the anniversary of the night they'd met, and James had asked Amanda to meet him after her shift. They sat in her office, the clinic quiet now that the last patient had been seen. Do you ever think about that night? James asked. All the time, Amanda replied. It was the night I remembered why I became a doctor. I think about it too, James said, but not for the reason you might think. He leaned forward. That night, I'd made a decision. I was going to treat that infected hand one more time with whatever I could find. And if it didn't get better, I was going to accept that this was how my story ended. I was ready to give up. Amanda felt her chest tighten. But then you saw me, James continued, not as a problem to be solved or an inconvenience to be managed, but as a person who mattered. That night, you didn't just treat an infection, you reminded me that I was still worth fighting for. He pulled out a worn piece of paper, the prescription note she'd written 5 years ago, directing him to the free clinic. I've kept this all these years, he said, because it represents the moment when everything changed. When I decided to keep fighting, to rebuild, to believe that maybe there was still a future worth living for. Amanda wiped tears from her eyes. James, I had no idea. That's the thing about kindness, he replied. We never really know how far it reaches. You treated me for an infected hand, but what you really did was remind me that I was still human, still valuable, still worth saving. Everything that's happened since, the software sale, the investments, this clinic, the thousands of people we've helped, it all started because you chose to see me that night. James stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood the clinic served. I've thought a lot about what wealth really means, he said. I have more money now than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but the richest moment of my life wasn't when the tech company bought my software or when my investments paid off. It was when you treated me like I mattered, when I had absolutely nothing to offer you in return. He turned back to Amanda. Real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in moments when we choose to see each other's humanity, even when there's no apparent benefit to ourselves. Amanda thought about all the patients they'd treated over the past year. The lives changed, the suffering relieved, the dignity restored. All of it traced back to one night when she decided to risk her career to help a stranger. I want to tell you something I've never told anyone, James said. That night, after I left the ER, I went back to the place where I'd been sleeping. I still had the antibiotics you'd given me, the instructions for wound care. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. What? Amanda asked softly. Hope, James replied. Not hope that my circumstances would improve, though they eventually did. Hope that there was still goodness in the world, that not everyone had forgotten how to see each other, how to care for each other. He sat back down across from her. That hope, Dr. Richardson, was worth more than all the money I've made since then, because it reminded me why life was worth living. 5 years had passed since that night, but the ripples continued to spread. The Richardson Community Health Initiative had expanded to 12 cities. Over 50,000 patients had been treated, most of whom would never have received care otherwise. The program had inspired similar initiatives at 30 other hospitals, creating a movement that was slowly changing how healthcare approached underserved populations. But more than the numbers, more than the national recognition and the awards, Amanda remembered the individual faces. The single father who cried with relief when his son's asthma was treated without a bill, the elderly woman who'd been rationing her heart medication, the young couple who finally sought prenatal care because they knew they wouldn't be turned away. Each of them had their own version of that night in the ER. Each of them had experienced what it meant to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with dignity regardless of their bank account. James had created a scholarship fund too, something Amanda learned about by accident. The Crawford Engineering Scholarship paid full tuition plus living expenses for students who'd experienced homelessness or housing insecurity. The only requirement was that recipients commit to using their education to help others facing similar struggles. 15 students had graduated in the program's first 3 years. They'd gone on to become engineers, teachers, social workers, and urban planners, all of them dedicated to solving the problems that had once nearly destroyed them. It's not charity, James explained when Amanda asked him about it. It's investment in human potential. Every one of those students has brilliance and talent that the world almost lost because they fell through society's cracks. I'm just giving them the same chance you gave me, the chance to rebuild and contribute. On the 5th anniversary of that first night, the clinic held a celebration. Patients, donors, staff, and board members filled the space. There There were speeches about impact and statistics about lives changed. But the moment that would be remembered happened when James stood up to speak and asked if anyone in the room had a story they wanted to share about how the clinic had helped them. A young woman stood up, nervous but determined. "My name is Maria. 2 years ago, I was sleeping in my car with my 2 kids. I got sick, really sick, but I was terrified to go to the ER because I knew the bill would destroy any chance I had of getting an apartment." She looked at Amanda. "Dr. Richardson treated me here. She didn't just give me medicine. She treated me like I was someone worth caring about, like my life mattered." Maria's voice broke. "I'm a nursing student now, graduating next year, because Dr. Richardson showed me that there are still people who care, who see us, who believe we're worth saving." One by one, people stood up to share their stories. A man who'd received mental health treatment he couldn't afford elsewhere. A teenager who'd gotten asthma medication that kept her out of the ER. A grandmother who'd received diabetes care that probably saved her life. Each story was different, but the theme was the same. Someone had seen them. Someone had treated them with dignity. Someone had reminded them that they mattered. Amanda watched, overwhelmed, as the stories continued. This was why she'd become a doctor, not for the money or the prestige, but for these moments when medicine remembered its true purpose: healing people, all people, because every human life has value. James caught her eye from across the room and smiled. No words were needed. They both understood the profound truth they had learned, that kindness, offered freely without expectation of return, has power we can barely comprehend. It ripples outward in ways we never see, changing lives and creating possibilities that never would have existed otherwise. The most powerful thing about Amanda and James's story isn't the money or the clinics or even the thousands of lives changed. It's the reminder that every person we pass on the street, every patient we see, every stranger we encounter is a complete human being with a story we don't know, potential we can't see, and dignity that exists regardless of their circumstances. James had been moments away from giving up when Amanda chose to see him. That choice didn't just save his life, it created a cascade of hope that continues to spread, touching people neither of them will ever meet. Sometimes we think our small acts of kindness don't matter. We think that helping one person can't possibly make a difference in a world with so many problems. But Amanda and James's story proves otherwise. One night, one choice, one act of seeing another person's humanity. That's all it took to change everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why kindness matters, then subscribe to the Real Life Stories. Because every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the power to create ripples that change the world in ways we never imagined.